Welcome back. This is Video Shorts, Module 5, and you're watching Track 2, Frameworks to Practice. A trauma-informed approach begins with identifying our social location and entering the room as a learner. It requires the presence of a learner, and regardless of the level of practice, it means that I bring my whole self to a practice environment aligned with honoring the intersectional space of whatever interaction that is. What if the most important thing you bring to trauma work is not your expertise, but how you show up? What if memorizing frameworks can pull away the attention from what's happening in the moment? And what if curiosity about what's alive right now matters more than knowing exactly what to do next? Trauma is not always visible. It might be hidden in regulation, in withdrawal, or in the body's silence. Waiting for somebody to disclose it or to show signs of trauma before we act, that's a risk. So instead, we build systems, spaces, and relationships that anticipate, not respond. So we design for safety, choice, transparency from the start, not as an afterthought. There are various models of trauma-informed practice. Some of them outline 6 principles, some 4, others 5. They differ in name and the nuance matters. But across most of them, you see safety, physical, emotional, and cultural, trust and transparency, what you say, what you intend, and how you follow through, peer support, shared space, not expert to subject, collaboration and mutuality, flattening the power differential and meaningfully sharing it, voice and choice, autonomy over compliance. Culture, historical, and gender awareness means recognizing context, identity, and system harms. These aren't items to check off. They are conditions within which we weave how we are in the room, how we enter, how we conduct ourselves. They help us develop a setting where the client more than feels safe, feels willing to be vulnerable, where we've actually communicated that we're more curious than judgmental. You can list all the correct terms and still create a space that feels cold, hierarchical, or unsafe. Because what matters first is how people feel in your presence, pre-verbal, often unconscious, what they sense when you walk in the room, what your body says before your mouth opens. If someone's nervous system is scanning the space, checking, can I stay? Will I be safe? Will I be judged? Then your presence is the intervention before your words ever land. I was working with a client once years ago, and she was planning her wedding. She'd come in and she would talk about the flowers and the venue and the dress, and everything was happy and light and joyful, and I was happy for her. But I found myself thinking about her after sessions on my way home. And that didn't make sense to me because I rarely carry sessions out of the office. I got my start in crisis intervention, and we were trained to work with them, help them, give them resources, and then shut it down. Don't try to follow up and find out what happened because it's only going to get us burned out. So that's the reason why I started doing that, and I can do it. So I called my supervisor, and I started talking. All of a sudden, I was overwhelmed with sadness. I was sobbing. It wasn't her wedding. It was mine. My husband had passed 5 years earlier, and that moment made it clear to me that trauma doesn't honor our timelines. It doesn't always look like a crisis, and sometimes it hides in joy. And what mattered most wasn't the protocol. It was noticing that something felt off. And I stayed with that feeling, and I reached out. In 2024, there was an article written, and it warns that trauma-informed programs risk reviving older cultural deficit narratives, especially for students of color and those in poverty, under the guise of help. In other words, even well-intentioned practices can replicate harm if they assume what's broken rather than what's possible. So trauma-informed practice must be relational and utilize critical theory. It demands cultural humility, awareness of power differentials, and an asset-based lens, not just managing the trauma, but thriving in the environment. So what anchors these tenets in real work? Well, 2 practices: cultural humility, which you're never going to completely understand somebody else's experience, and that's not the goal. And competence isn't the goal. The goal is openness, reflexivity, and readiness to be changed. Intersectional awareness, trauma doesn't hit everyone the same. Race, gender, class, identity, history, and access, they all shape how trauma shows up and how we respond. These practices keep frameworks alive so they don't become scripts that you follow, but conditions of your practice. And so here's how it looks in motion. Step into the room without taking over. Read the room before rushing into solutions or assumptions. Observe before you intervene. Offer an opt-out without penalty. Financial instability, exposure to community violence, systemic racism, these shape nervous systems. A truly trauma-informed space anticipates that and doesn't require disclosure or storytelling. And remember, language matters. And when someone says, I feel fat, don't correct them. That's not a feeling. That phrase may hold whatever they've got. The work is reflect, summarize, invite more, and don't interpret too early. This is not a finish line. It's not mastery. It's about staying in the work, containing, regulating, and staying curious. Because how you show up, consistent, real, responsive, and as part of the collective, that is your practice.